Hey everyone, I'm Alan Taylor, Managing Director of Endeavor Catalyst, and I'm here with Phil. Hi Phil.
Hello. Hello, nice to see you again.
Really great to be here with you. I'm really honored to be here. In my day job with Endeavor, I run our venture capital fund, investing in amazing entrepreneurs all over the world. But I was honored to be invited here today to have this conversation with Phil, who is an old friend actually from almost a decade ago, but really excited to see in this new kind of setting. So Phil, really happy you're here. And I'll do a quick intro for you, but of course would love to hear a little of this in your own words as well. Phil originally was the co-founder of Evernote, a super useful tool that a lot of you probably use and is a big part of my life. And that's when we met back in the day, when he was still part of that company. He went on to start something called All Turtles, which is an AI startup studio that's sort of using artificial intelligence to solve lots of different problems. And as far as I understand it, I think mmhmm, his current company, is a platform that sort of came out of that, and he's been building now for the last year or so. Phil, I guess without spending too much time telling people about you, would love, in your own words, for you to tell us a little bit of what is mmhmm and what is it that you're building today?
Well, mmhmm is, well, it started as a joke. We were working at All Turtles, the product studio, and in March of 2020, we all went, we gave up our offices, we all went fully distributed. And for the first couple of months, it was just really, pretty scary. And then it got really boring. By May of 2020, we were just endlessly sitting on video and everything was tedious and gloomy. And so we just started goofing around. We were just wanted to make something to just make us smile a little bit. So we were just playing around with, GIFs and funny backgrounds on Zoom and that kind of stuff. Never intended to make it a real product, but got a lot of encouragement along the way to kind of turn it into something. And then the breakthrough moment for mmhmm really came when I was asked to teach a class, and this is a class that I've taught like many times. It's about startup metrics and this like state machine model that how to measure stuff. And I wasn't going to, I taught it a lot in person, but I was asked to teach it online because of COVID, and I didn't want to do it. I was going to cancel because I thought it'd be really boring. It's like I couldn't imagine like sitting through listening to me talking about startup metrics and showing slides on Zoom. But then I thought, well, we're probably going to be doing this for a year or two, so can't cancel everything. So I may as well get really good at it.
Yeah.
So I thought, all right, what if I redid the whole presentation so that I wasn't trying to recreate what I was doing in person on video? I was just do it completely new, completely natively for video. And so I used this early version of mmhmm to show slides, and it's up on the internet, but I was like flying around and pointing to things with my head and doing wackiness stuff like that. And it turned out really good. And not only did it turn out better than, than I thought it would, it actually, I think, turned out better than my live classes used to be. Like, I think the students who saw it on video had a better experience because I could do all the stuff that I could never do live. And that's really when we thought like, oh, well, actually, video doesn't have to be a short-term poor substitute for being in person. It could, it could really give you communication superpowers. It could be part of like the permanent change in the world. And that's when we decided to make it a real company, and we raised a bunch of money and hired a bunch of people. And it's been about a year old and going great so far.
Super interesting. I didn't anticipate this ahead of time, but I'm immediately going to be jealous of the fact that you're using mmhmm to do all kinds of cool stuff while we talk. But that's okay. I'll try to manage through it.
I'll try to keep it down to a bearable level.
Well, you start flying around and pointing at things with your head, then I'll know we're in trouble.
Yeah.
No, so I think the topic of the conference, really, this summit, is about kind of helping the entrepreneurial community rethink the way that they're hiring, that they're training, that they're engaging with their people, right? In this new world that we live in. Many ways, I think the story of mmhmm and its kind of product development is a good metaphor here. But it's also interesting to note the way you're actually building the company, right? So I think you've said a couple times in public that mmhmm doesn't operate as a remote team, but rather it's a fully distributed team, like from the beginning, from the foundations. I guess talk about why you're doing it that way and what the advantages are.
Yeah, I think our first Well, we started out being remote because we had to be.
Right.
But then we quickly kind of made a new rule, which is that no one is remote. Because I think when you say remote, like it feels different. Like this is remote. Remote is other people are gathered and you're kind of by yourself and lonely. It's a fundamental disadvantage. So we stopped being remote and we started being distributed, which is all about the intentionality. We're distributed kind of like the internet is distributed. Like the people who created the internet like designed it to be a distributed system. Not because they didn't know how to make a centralized network, and certain things would have been much easier if there was like one big server somewhere that just had the internet, like all sorts of things would be easier. But no one thinks that that's a good approach because obviously being distributed has such fundamental advantages. Like you couldn't make it centralized, and so we've done the same thing. Like we have chosen to design our company to be distributed. Not because we can't be in an office, but because it's better. It gives us, superpowers to be distributed, and we really kind of focus on those. And yeah, certain things are harder when you're distributed, but I think like the things that need to be overcome, the challenges are tiny compared to the superpowers, compared to the advantages that we get.
So what are some of those superpowers that you guys have as a distributed team?
Well, I mean, there's lots. Let's just start with 0% of our people waste time commuting. That's kind of amazing, right? Like,
yeah.
Right? It's average like 2 hours a day. Like imagine if somehow magically, this is like an alternate reality, and no one in the company ever commuted because we had like teleport technology. So everyone just teleported into the office, and that's the way it's always been. And I come into the office one day, and I say, hey, everyone, gather around. I've got a CEO idea. I'm going to need every one of you to waste 2 hours every day sitting in traffic. Yes, it's not very productive. You can't get any work done. And yes, you can't spend that time with your family or your friends. And yes, it's really stressful. And yeah, it's pretty bad for you. And oh my God, it's terrible for the environment. But, it's a strategic decision. Every single person, 2 hours every day, wasted sitting in traffic, go. Right? Like the board would be like, CEO's gone crazy. I would get fired immediately. That's kind of what we're asking people to do. So just that, right? Just something as simple as every single person has 2 hours a day extra time because no one has to commute. I'm never giving that up. And that's like a small benefit. There's many more superpowers that are actually even more profound once you start to get into them.
So for folks, I love that kind of framing of it. For folks who are newer to this, I guess, or to kind of wrapping their head around it, what are some of the things you guys are designing into that company culture then, or I guess frameworks for how you work together? What are the most important tools, for example, that your teams are actually using?
Well, I mean, the most important thing, I think, is the realization that we are choosing to do this. That
right,
this
the intentionality of it. I get it, yeah.
This is not a substitute for being in person. This isn't,
right.
Because I think when you think of things as a short-term substitute, then you don't really put in the investment to get good at it. You just say, okay, what do we do to get through this? But we're not trying to get through anything. We're trying to thrive in the new world, which could be a much better world if we work to make it better than the old world it used to be. So that's kind of the main thing, is like, it's very natural for humans to focus on the problems and to focus on problem solving. That is the way that most of us think.
Yeah.
But if you focus on the problems, you kind of lose sight of the advantages, and then it's harder to make anything work. We force ourselves to focus on the advantages of being fully distributed.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to literally talk much more about the advantages than about the disadvantages. And then the disadvantages, of course, are there, but we come up with ways of overcoming them. But the advantages are staggering. So, for example, 100%. Like, you've talked to a lot of CEOs, and I am 100% confident that when you ask any CEO, what's the hardest thing about the company, you only get one answer. Because, like, you guys know this, right? When you go to CEO school, they teach you that when someone asks what's the hardest thing about the company, we're only allowed to give one answer. So every CEO for the past 100 years has always given the same answer, which is, it's the people. It's always hiring and recruiting and keeping talent. Like, you have to say it's the people. The people, hiring is always the hardest thing. And it's mostly true.
Yeah.
And so we've just spent 100 years as CEOs whining about how difficult it is to hire people. And all of a sudden, since we're fully distributed, 100% of our job positions say global. Like 100% of our jobs, we hire the best people everywhere in the world, which means that we have tens of thousands of times more potential people at the top of the funnel. It's like the greatest solution to making it hard to hire people. And, we just double down on that. So when we think about how do we do recruiting, well, we make sure we have recruiters in many countries all over the world. We think about compensation. Well, we think that you should make the same amount of money regardless of where you live, because your compensation should be based on your contribution, not on where you live. So we're working towards that. So we try to start with an advantage, and then we say, okay, how can we double down on that advantage? How do we make it even better? And along the way, we also come up with difficulties, and then we work on how to fix those difficulties. And we could talk about both advantages and disadvantages for weeks. There's lots of stuff which we're just learning.
Well, actually, let's talk about people and hiring for a minute. I guess just for context, you guys have been very successful.
Medium successful.
Well, I'll say very successful, bringing on great capital partners, right? Bringing in, I think, Sequoia and SoftBank and other folks to support what you're building at the early stages here. So you've got a good budget and you've got a good vision. How's that actually working in terms of hiring people? What is the size of the team right now, and kind of what maybe is different or new in the way you're actually hiring, if that makes sense?
It's working great. It took a little bit of time to get good at it, a few months, but now I think we're actually pretty good at it. I think we made like 8 offers last week, and I think like 6 of them are going to get accepted or got accepted already. So we're up to, we started the company about 15 months ago. We were just 2 people.
Yeah.
Me and Steve. Now it's up to about 90, 95.
Okay.
So, so we've hired
that's a lot.
Like 80 people in the past year. It's a lot for us.
Yeah.
And literally from everywhere. We've got people in many states in the US. We've got people in, we just hired someone in the Dominican Republic. We've got people in Brazil. We've got people in Japan. We've got people in Taiwan, like pretty much everywhere. And yeah, it works. It works great. We had to get good at it. We had to figure out, okay, how do we do our applicant tracking? How do we do interviews? Once someone is there, how do we make sure that, we're communicating correctly? What kinds of people could be successful in this environment? It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
We're very clear when we recruit people that we are fully distributed. So if you want to be in an office with people that you're working with, you're not going to get that with us. We are fully distributed. It doesn't mean we never get together in person. We do. We get together once in a while. We bring people together when it's possible, but that's only for fun. It's not for work, because why would we waste the precious time of being together on work? We can work over video. It's much easier. But the right kind of person who wants to be treated as an adult, not told how to structure their day, have full flexibility in how to be productive all over the world. It's pretty attractive for the right kind of people. And so it's been good once we kind of figured out how to talk about it and how to measure things correctly.
I'm super intrigued by that. Endeavor is a global organization. So we actually have people in, I think it's now up to 63 cities in 40 different countries, right? It's from a different starting point, right? It was by design that we wanted them in those places to build those relationships with entrepreneurs and folks.
Right.
But I think some of the things you're talking about have huge implications for an organization like ours as well. I want to double click on something you said about it's not for everybody. We're learning that, there are certain people or maybe personalities or traits or, folks who thrive in this environment more than others. What are we learning there? What do you guys have anything you're kind of teasing out of the early data here, the early months of doing it, of people who like this really do great in this environment?
Yeah, our policy, which we've really had to double down on, is you're an adult. We have a policy against hiring children. Everyone that works with us is an adult. And you need to want to be treated like an adult, which means that the company isn't there to provide every single aspect of all of your personal, professional, emotional, romantic, social needs. That's not the role of the company. I think the lowest point on that was like, Google or Facebook in like 2010. Like if you imagine like the Google campus in like 2010, it was like literally 100% of your needs were provided by being in this building, being on campus. That's where you did all of your work. All of your friends were there. That's where you went out on dates. That's where you ate all your meals. That's where you got your hair cut. That's where you did your laundry. A lot of people slept there. Like the company provided everything. And that is terrible. Like really unhealthy, really bad, leads to all sorts of, bad stuff. But you kind of had to, because of course, like everyone has to commute. So everyone is like wasting all of their time, like sitting in this place. And we're going for the other direction, which is, what are we as a company? Well, we're a collection of professional adults who come together to do important work, important high impact work at a very high level. And that's it. And we're not trying to be a family. We're not here to be all of your friends. You have plenty of friends, especially if you work distributed. You can live wherever you live. You don't have to spend a contiguous amount of time in an office. You don't have to waste it. You have a lot more time to integrate family and friends and life. We can't micromanage you. We can't judge whether or not you're being productive based on whether you look productive. Like I don't see you anymore in the office. So you're not going to get a promotion because you show up early and you leave late and you look like you're really busy. That was always a really bad way to judge people's productivity, of course, but now like we can't do it. So we're looking for people who are comfortable with that. Who are like, okay, I'm not looking for the company to provide every aspect of my life. I want to do very high quality, high impact work with other professionals. And I want to be in a place that trusts me to make decisions about when to work, when not to work, where to work, how to set up my environment, how to be productive. And then we just provide the support and the resources for that. So there's like a certain amount of autonomy, or being an adult, that I think is critical. So yeah, it isn't for everyone, but as you would expect, there's a lot of people who love that, right? Who want to be treated as adults at work.
Yeah, it's a fascinating way to think about it. I'm sure for many folks in our audience, like it kind of flips everything on its head, right? Of the way we've done this historically. What does it mean for the concept or the idea of a company culture or a corporate culture, right? We have all these ingrained thoughts of like, oh, culture is what happens at the water cooler or at the office. There's obviously still a culture in this setup, but what are your thoughts on what that actually kind of means?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one thing about this, which is I hear this a lot, especially now, about well, how do we restore, how do we preserve our corporate culture? Especially big companies say this now, and I'm like, fuck your corporate culture. It was never that good to begin with. Why do you want to go back to it? Let's we don't need to go back to anything. We need to go forward to the way, we don't need to go back to the way things used to be. We should go forward to the way things should be. And when everything is different in the world, when everything changes, this is our opportunity to change it better. So like all of these companies who are worried about preserving their culture, was their culture really worth preserving? Was it that great? Or is it worth improving? And, so the real question is like, okay, how do we improve the culture? How do we get it to the point where we want to get it? You can never preserve culture. I think that's always been a mistake. As a startup, you start thinking, once your startup starts growing, you start being a little bit successful, it's very natural to think about like, oh, how do we preserve the startup culture? And you can't. You can't preserve anything. When you try to preserve something, it becomes brittle, it breaks, it becomes broken. The only thing you can do is change it. So as the CEO, your job is not to preserve anything. As a CEO, your job is to direct the change. You're supposed to decide what direction you want it to change in, and then you are intentional about the change. So don't preserve it, change it, grow it, but don't let it happen by itself. Don't just like have your culture change randomly and then you just feel like a victim. It's your job to change it. So change it.
I love that idea. I want to talk a little bit about where is going or what it might become. I think it's a great founding story. If it started as a joke, it was this thing we were playing with, and then we turned out we were onto something. I think you've said a few times in a couple of things I've watched, that getting people to smile more is sort of a fundamental part of what we're trying to do here, right? And I think that's great because I'm sure everybody listening in can relate to the 15 faces on the screen sort of droning on video meeting, right? So what does that mean for what you guys are building into mmhmm? What are some of the features of mmhmm you've designed already or that you are designing that make you smile more?
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. So we have a design philosophy that we stole from BizStone, who was one of our early investors. Everything that we make has to be fun and useful. It always has to be both. It has to be useful because we're trying to make an important product to improve the world, and that's how people will use it. But it also has to be fun because that's how you build the muscle memory. Because when you're having fun, like that's how you get good at something. That's how you master it. That's how you use it both. So everything we build, our central design philosophy, our central test, is something that's to be fun and useful. And the word for this that we stole from Biz is useful. This is what they used to say at Twitter. This was their test at early Twitter. Is they would say for a new feature, they would say, "Is it useful?" And if it's not, then you don't build it, and we don't build it. So we don't build anything that's only fun. That's purely whimsical. Like, no. We don't build anything that isn't fun, that's only useful. No. We only focus on things that are both. And it's actually a fairly rigorous test. And yeah, it's there to get into people's brains, because when you're smiling, especially for communication, you're just much more effective. You're processing information, you're more open to new ideas. You could change a lot more people's minds with a joke than with a sermon. Like the act of smiling, the act of enjoying yourself, of laughing a little bit, changes your whole cognitive landscape, makes you open to new ideas, makes you much more convincing. All of these good things happen in communication when people are having fun. So we completely reject, doing stuff in a boring way, doing stuff that's not useful. So, we have everything that we build is like this. Some small examples are things like, like we have gesture detection, or we have filters. So like this. Okay, now I just turn myself into an 8-bit pixel. This is useful because it's fun because now I can pretend I'm Donkey Kong, character. But it's also useful because maybe I just got out of the shower and my hair isn't very good and I don't want to look at myself. So I can do something like this. It's actually both. Or we do big hands. We do gesture detection. So if I do like a heart emoji, right, I get a big heart, or like a thumbs up. So even if you've got 10 people in 20 people in little boxes in a Zoom call, people can do these kind of big emojis. They can see how things are going. This is useful. It's cute and it's fun. Everyone loves doing this. Look how fun this is. But it's actually a really useful, good feature. As well. And, those are obviously very small examples, but this is the philosophy for everything we build.
How long before useful makes it into the Webster's official dictionary, you think?
I've got a few. Well, I didn't invent the word useful. As far as I know, that was BizStone that invented it. So I can't take credit for that. But I've got a few other words ahead of that I want to get into the dictionary. But they're not returning my phone calls or my texts. I've sent Webster's and Oxford lots of word suggestions, and they totally ignored me. I have a word. Since you asked, nothing to do with any of this, but since you asked, okay, I have a word for people who are mostly vegetarian, but sometimes eat fish, but they're not very enthusiastic about the fish. I have a word for that, which I've been trying to get into the dictionary because I think it's a great word. It's pescadasical. So first we do pescadasical, then we move on to useful.
I like it. I'm in for pescadasical for sure. I guess I had one more question I wanted to personally ask, and then there's a few coming in from the audience that we'll jump to. But the personal one, Phil, is a little bit on managing time and managing energy, I suppose. What kind of tips, maybe personally, or that you guys as a company have seen on, most of this work now is sort of asynchronous. When it's sort of synchronous, then it's obviously on video. But how are folks within the company kind of learning new ways of how to manage their time or manage their energy throughout a quote work day?
Well, I think that's a great question. So my work life kind of balance and integration is better than it's ever been. Like I feel better than I have been ever, and I'm also more productive than I've ever been. And I think this is true. I don't want to speak for everyone in the company, but it's true for a bunch of people. And it's because we've embraced this distributed lifestyle. So I choose, for example, where I want to work from. You know, one of the major, I think, misconceptions about distributed work is that it means working from home, but it doesn't. Like distributed work is not working from home. You have to work from home if that's like an emergency because it's the pandemic and you're unprepared and all you have is like your apartment with dogs and children screaming and that kind of stuff. Once you have time to like get your life in order, you don't have to work from home. I don't work from home very much. I work from home about a third of the time. I'm at home now because we're doing this broadcast and I want to be like with a good microphone and camera, so I have a nice setup. But about a third of the time, I work from a museum. There's this amazing museum very close to me. I'm currently in Bentonville in Northwest Arkansas. There's this amazing museum, Crystal Bridges, which is like 10-minute walk from me. There's another one called the Momentary, which is like a 5-minute walk from me. And I work from there. Sometimes I walk around. Sometimes I go work out of the library. The library at Crystal Bridges is like it's one of the most beautiful spaces in the world that I've ever seen. I've been to a lot of places. It's very quiet. It's very calm. It's very inspiring. I work there by myself. Sometimes I go there with other people. If I need to puzzle through some kind of a creative challenge, what better place to do it than in a museum? It's so much better than being in a conference room somewhere. In fact, like there's sort of a good question, right? Which is like, why isn't everyone working from a museum if you're trying to do something creative? And then sometimes I work from the gym. I joined this club. There's like a lot of really cool lounges and hangout areas, but there's also an amazing pool. And so, and like nice showers and a changing room. And so I can do a couple of Zoom calls and then I swim a few laps in the pool. And what I figured out is that like swimming in a pool is the exact opposite of being in a Zoom call. Like everything is the opposite. It's like all of the sensations are like as far away as you can get between being in a Zoom call and swimming. And I would never be able to do that before. When could I go swimming in the middle of the day?
Yeah.
But now like I work from there, so I can do it. So I can choose my environment to accomplish whatever it is I'm trying to accomplish. If I need quiet, if I need inspiration, if I need a break, because I don't have to work for a contiguous 14 hours. I can be productive whenever I want to, and everyone can. Everyone who works in a company like ours. And this is a profound change in the world. This is going to ripple. This is going to change everything about how we've built society, because it calls into question the fundamental bones, the skeleton of how we've thought about work. Mm-hmm. And what it means to work, and what it means to retire, and what it means to have a weekend, and what it means to have family. It's better than it's ever been. And the amazing thing for me right now is, my standard of living right now in Bentonville in Northwest Arkansas is much higher than it was when I was in San Francisco. This is the nicest I've ever had it. But it's not because I'm rich, which is kind of amazing. Like when I used to live in San Francisco, my standard of living was much worse than right now. But even though, it wasn't terrible, it was okay, but it was only okay because I had a lot more money than most people that worked in my company. So I could afford to pay huge amounts for rent and that kind of stuff. It was still pretty bad, but it was better than most people who worked with me.
Right.
But now 100% of the people in my company can afford to live in the house I'm currently living in. Mm-hmm. They can afford to go to the same museums. They can afford to belong to the same club, because A, the company pays for all that stuff for everyone. And B, it's actually not that expensive because it's not in San Francisco. So this standard of living, which is the best I've ever had in my life, is available to several 100 million people in the world. Not everyone, sadly, but knowledge workers.
Yeah.
And I think over the next 10 years, it's going to like literally 2 years ago, this was available to like 10,000 people who can like choose how they want to live separate from their job and not worry about it. That was maybe like 10,000, 50,000 people in the world can do that. All of a sudden it went from 50,000 to like 200-300 million. And I think over the next decade, it's going to go from 200-300 million to 1 or 2 billion. And that is the opportunity. Like that is the change that changes everything in the world.
It's a fascinating idea. I know we just have like 1 minute left. I guess the question to end on that came from the audience, which is, for people who are new to this, right, trying to wrap their head around it, CEOs listening, or even workers in companies, what would you recommend to them? Where should they start? Right? What do you do first when you're trying to sort of do this kind of radical change to a company or to a culture?
I mean, I think the most important thing is actually not a difficult thing, which is it gets back to where we started. It's about the intentionality of it. It's about like just like force yourself to not think about the problems. When people start asking you about the problems, oh, but how do you deal with this? And what is this? This is different, harder, and this is harder, and this is harder. Just be like, today, we're only going to talk about the advantages, and just force yourself and force your company, not all the time, but for like a day, just a day. Just spend the day thinking about the advantages, the superpowers, and how you can really get the most out of them, and don't worry about the difficulties. And and then see if you can go for a week. And then, sure, once in a while you have to talk about the difficulties, but we so over-index on that we lose sight of why this is worth doing. Yeah. And if you focus on the difficulties, then you think it's a short-term thing that you're trying to survive. You have to shift your mentality from surviving to thriving, from temporary to permanent, and just do that by focusing on the good stuff and forcing yourself to do it. That's
awesome. So really, really appreciate it. I think these messages and these kind of words are so important for people to hear. And this has been a lot of fun. I have a Zoom call I was going to do next, but maybe I'll go for a swim instead. That seems like a better option.
This is a good idea.
Thanks again.
Thanks,
Good to see
Alan.
you.
Bye.
Take care.